Okay, this is part 4 of our relationship videos. So now we're going to talk about the early years of marriage. Some of the first issues that couples face are usually around finances. How tough issues early in the marriage are handled sets the groundwork for the rest. So they need to learn how to handle those issues early in the marriage, and that kind of sets up how they're going to deal with issues for the rest of their marriage. So the couple needs to learn to adjust to different perceptions and expectations that each person has for the other. So they need to make sure that they have realistic perceptions of each other and realistic expectations. And they need to learn how to handle confrontation and resolve conflicts. So they need to have more accurate perceptions of what their spouses are like, for women especially. We don't want women to idealize their husband. They need to have accurate, realistic views. And this leads to more supportive behaviors, leads to more feelings of control in the marriage, and decreased risk of divorce. And couples need to acknowledge and address their problems early on before they become bigger. So we said that as marriage goes on, we see a decline in satisfaction. And there are lots of reasons for that. One of the biggest reasons for the decline in marital satisfaction is, I'm sorry to say, children. With the passage of time and increased stress, satisfaction declines. For most couples, this is the main reason. Children are stressful, and it puts a lot of strain on the marriage. The temperament of the child also matters. Fussier babies lead to more marital problems, just because that baby is harder to take care of. It's more frustrating. Parenthood also means less time to devote to the spouse and to the marriage. Both African American and European American couples report an increase in conflict after the birth of the first child. There's just a lot more stress. There's a lot more to fight about. Children aren't the only factor, however. Child-free couples also have a decline in satisfaction. So some of the factors here might be disillusionment. So they just have a decline in the feelings of love. They don't demonstrate affection as much. They feel that their spouse is less responsive. And ambivalence increases. Remember, ambivalence is liking and not liking something at the same time. Military could be a factor. Couples spend significant time apart when one of the partners is in the military. And even when that partner comes home, if they have PTSD, it may increase spouse direction aggression and just put a lot of strain on the marriage. Another factor is just what the spouse believes is important in the military. If they believe deployment will cause issues, it will. If they believe challenges will make the marriage stronger, they will. So the way the couple feels about someone joining the military or being deployed becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Divorce rates are higher for female service members than male service members. There's just something about a woman being in the service that leads to an unhappier marriage. So how do we keep marriages happy? Okay. So couples need to be flexible and adaptable. Couples who have been happily married show an ability to adapt and to change in the relationship. They have good stress. They can deal with stress. They have good conflict reduction. They can keep romance in the relationship. They share religious beliefs and spirituality. This is especially important in lower SES, to have that common faith. The key is mostly how well couples communicate their thoughts, actions, and feelings to one another. Communication is vital. They need to show intimacy and support for one another, and these factors determine the level of conflict and therefore how happy they're likely to be in the long term. This is especially important in high stress areas such as children and work and after long separations. So communication and showing support and affection for each other are key. So now I have a research project idea for you. Again, not an assignment, just an idea for your short project. Interview someone who has been through a divorce, ask them about some of their perceived reasons for the divorce, and compare those to the issues we discussed. Or you could even talk to someone who has had a long, happy marriage and see if their factors match what we just talked about. So now that we've talked about marriage, let's talk about family. So usually we get children in a marriage. So the family forms. Okay? In Western societies, the most common form of a family is the nuclear family. This is parents and children. This is what we see the most often in Western cultures. But around the world, the most common form is the extended family. Grandparents and other relatives live with parents and children. So I'm going to post a discussion question on Blackboard about what you think the pros and cons are of a nuclear family and an extended family. So we've discussed families a lot before from the child's perspective, so now we're going to discuss it from the parent's perspective, now that we're in the adult section. Okay, so the first issue is deciding whether or not to have children. For the most part, people do not weigh the pros and cons of having children. They don't make this a logical decision. People who are focused on their career or enjoy their freedom have not made the deliberate decision to not have children. Rather, they just haven't thought about it. It just doesn't occur to them to have children yet because they're busy with other parts of their lives. More than half of U.S. pregnancies are unplanned. It's not like most people sit down and decide to get pregnant. The first pregnancy is a milestone for families, and it has benefits and costs. So some of the pros: children add affection to the family. They improve family ties. They bring families closer together. They give parents a sense of immortality and accomplishment. Most parents willingly sacrifice much for their children, and most parents want their children to grow up to be happy and successful. There's lots of love between parents and kids. But what are some of the cons of having children? Well, finances. Children are really, really expensive. By the time a child turns 17, households that make less than about $61,000 per year will pay more than $176,000 on the child. That's a lot of money to get the child through high school. We're not even adding college expenses. Those are in addition to this amount. But these expenses are for food, shelter, clothing, necessities, etc. It takes a lot of money to raise a kid. These costs do not differ between two and single parent households. The costs are the same, so single parents have a much bigger burden. People without children have higher marital satisfaction, more freedom, and higher standards of living, mainly because they don't have that financial strain. For many reasons, an increasing number of people are choosing to not have children, and social attitudes are slowly improving toward child-free couples, but you still might see a lot of skepticism when a couple says they don't want to have a child, or a lot of pushback from their culture or their families. So, being a parent. When do people become parents? Well, the typical U.S. adult is now waiting longer to have children and having fewer of them once they do. The average age of women when they've had their first child is now 26. This has been increasing since 1970. So there are a lot of reasons for this. One is they're marrying later. They're not going to have children until after they're married, and if you marry later, you have children later. A lot of women now are also focusing on establishing a career first rather than just graduating college and getting married, or graduating high school and getting married. And sometimes it's just a personal choice. They just aren't ready to be parents yet, so they're waiting for longer. In general, as average education level of women increases, the birth rate decreases. So just as more and more women in the country get educated, we see the birth rate go down. And teen birth rate is also at a historic low. It seems like a major issue, but it's lower than it's ever been. So what are some of the benefits of waiting to have kids? Older mothers are more comfortable being parents. They spend more time with their babies, and they're more affectionate, sensitive, and supportive, which leads to a better attachment. They have higher maternal investment when their children are in middle childhood, and they have less conflict with their children when the children are adolescents. Men who become fathers in their 30s instead of their 20s are more invested in the paternal role, and they spend more time caring for their preschool children, and social attitudes are now reflecting this. We're a lot more supportive of fathers caring for their kids now than we used to be. So there seems to be a lot of benefits in waiting, and older parents tend to just be better parents. What about gay and lesbian parents? Are they any different? So they may have a biological child, get a donor so that one of them can be a biological parent, or they may adopt. Children raised by same-sex parents do not show any more problems than children raised by heterosexual couples, and they're just as psychologically healthy. They're equally adjusted, they show equivalent cognitive development, have similar behaviors in school. They don't show different rates of drugs or delinquency. In short, they're just the same. Gay and lesbian parents are the same as heterosexual parents. So, ethnic diversity. There's a lot of diversity in how people parent. For example, African American husbands are more likely than European American husbands to help with the household chores, regardless of whether or not their wife works. Most African American parents provide a very loving environment, and it's often in a religious context. They have pride in their cultural heritage, self-respect, and cooperation with that family. Native Americans, for many of them, they've lost their traditional cultural parenting skills. A lot of Native Americans have just lost their culture. Children were valued, women were sacred and honored, and men cared for and provided for the family. Tribal members tend to spend time teaching cultural values to the children, values such as cooperation, sharing, integrity, harmony with nature, etc. Some of these differ from European American values that emphasize competitiveness and individuality. Latino Americans. Almost 25% of children under 18 in the U.S. are Latino. This number is estimated to be 35% by 2050. They tend to have three key values: proper behavior, familialism, and the extended family. So familialism is the idea that the family's well-being takes precedence over the concerns of the individual. So it's all about the family. And this helps account for the large number of Latino American college students who still live at home. Extended families provide a support network, childcare, financial support, etc. There's a lot of benefits for having an extended family. And for Latino Americans, family is really important. For Asian Americans, they also value the family, but they have an even higher value on the extended family. Other key values in these households tend to be good grades in school, discipline, concern for what others think, and conformity, which goes against a lot of Western cultures that value individuality. Teens in Asian American families report higher feelings of obligation to their families. And last, multi-ethnic. This provides a different challenge to parents. Parents of biracial children report feeling discrimination and prejudiced behavior. The parents fear that children will be rejected by both of their racial communities. If anyone here is from a biracial household and you care to share, feel free to do that on our discussion forums. Research shows that mothers are key in multi-ethnic families. They tend to help the children identify with the father's ethnic identity, so it's really important to have a mother who's involved. We will finish our relationship in the last video.